Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to Constitutional Considerations here on Tactical Review. I'm Blair, joined once again by Elias of the Liberty Review podcast. Elias, welcome. Thanks for joining us this evening.
Hey. Absolutely glad to be here.
And once again, I do apologize for any buffering we have. That is on YouTube's side, judging by the fact that everything else is running smoothly. What can I say? They don't like what we have to say. Brownies for my fat welcome this evening. And I'm probably going to have to mention this again, but as I said a couple of weeks ago, and then kind of let this fall by the wayside, May is Stop the Bleed month. Now, most of the classes and things that would have been put on for the month of May, discounts for those kind of in-person training classes, that stuff's all had to be rearranged due to the COVID-19 pandemic. However, you can use promo code May25 over at narescue.com and get 25% off of community preparedness items, including tourniquets. Unfortunately, it doesn't look like it works with the trauma shears. I tried that this morning, and it doesn't make a lot of sense to me, but there it is. Anyway, so you can buy 4 tourniquets for the price of 3 currently. Ask me how I know. And speaking of, there's a link down in the description, or a link in my bio on Instagram. We are giving away a Cat Gen 7 tourniquet to one lucky winner. We will do that drawing via gleam.io, and the winner will be announced very early in the month of June. So that link is in the description, and it's my first attempt using Gleam. I think I have it set up right. Fingers crossed. So you going through Gleam, you have several ways to enter, and then your opportunity for a daily bonus entry. So go ahead and get involved with that, and somebody is going to be getting a potentially life-saving item from Tactical Review. You're welcome. Everybody else, feel free to grab your own. It's a good time to do it when you can get 25% off, and I think it's free shipping over $50. So keep that in mind. We've got Randall Hill in the chat, Mark 18 Mod 0, and Hunts for Life. How you all doing? Audio sounds awful. So is the audio garbly, or do we have like background fan noise? Because I do have a server running about 10 feet away. I've tried to deaden that. I've really got to get myself a dedicated server rack put someplace that's not in my home office. So and Mark 18, yeah, we kind of live our life under the assumption we're being lied to, or I do. I mean,
I figured the government's talking, there's lying going on.
Yeah. At this point, I like the meme, and I agree with it. At this point, I'm actually more willing to ask COVID-19 what it's going to do to protect me from the government. So, anyway, oh yeah, Randall, that, again, apologies. I have to do extra audio processing on every video I put out, and you can still hear it, but it's deadened. I should should have made that a stay-at-home project, but I didn't. I'm sorry. That's on me. I mean, obviously, it can't be on you guys. Well, let's blame Elias. I like that one.
Hey, I'm all for it.
Elias, speaking of which...
Hey, what's up?
Guys, I finally found in stock a case of Wolf Steel Case 55 grain 223. And so Elias will be joining me on the range here before too very much longer, and we are going to start abusing a poor, defenseless Palmetto State Armory AR-15. So that's going to be a good time.
It's not defenseless, okay? Guns are bad. Okay?
Oh yeah, it's one of them scary black rifles. So
exactly.
July 4th, many are calling for a show of force. Well, and there's a show of force made last Thursday somewhere. We're going to come back and talk to that again. And I did hear of some soldiers being mobilized towards the east from here in Indiana. And that's all I know. So I'm not sure if there's rumblings and simmerings that haven't even caught my radar yet. So I don't know. Tula makes good 75 grain steel case. I haven't shot their 75. I do also have a case of their 62 grain. My M&P 15 likes 62 grain. Of course, the M&P 15 is a twist and 9 instead of the twist and 7. That's pretty common in a lot of 16-inch ARs. So every now and again, if you guys go back in, it was in one of my fake hog zeroing videos that I had some random keyholes out of 55 grain. But it's a barrel that has less than probably less than 1,500 or 2,000 rounds at this point through it. So if I'm getting barrel wear after only 1,500 rounds with really none of them being extended session magnums, there's a problem. So Tula also makes range-friendly steel case ammo. If you guys aren't aware, if we can geek out just a little bit here. Obviously, the steel case, there's people who will say that steel case ammo wears your barrel faster. And obviously, the steel case on the cartridge has nothing to do with barrel wear itself, aside from possibly the chamber area. But legitimately, the steel that they use in the cartridge casing is very little harder than the brass used in brass cases on the Rockwell scale. Certainly not as hard as the nitride or chrome finish of a chamber. Anyway, what does wear potentially slightly faster is the fact that instead of just a copper jacket around the lead of the bullet, most of your steel case ammunition uses a bimetal. And what they do is they take steel powder and they take copper powder and then they compress it together to make sheets that they use to coat the lead. Obviously then they're kind of cutting the copper and making it go further, which is why part of the reason that steel case ammunition is on average 5 to 10 cents a round cheaper. A lot of ranges won't let you shoot that for various sundry reasons. One, if you're shooting against steel, well, there's some people out there who aren't smart enough to understand that M855 is magnetic because it has a steel penetrator core, and steel case ammunition is magnetic because there's soft steel mixed in with the brass, or with the copper rather. But it does also put off quite a fireworks show when you hit steel case, and if it's dry conditions at an outdoor range, it can potentially be a fire hazard. Anyway, all that to say, Tula has a range-friendly line of steel case ammo where everything from the ogive back is just like the rest of their steel case offerings, but the bullet itself is a traditional copper-clad full metal jacket. So you can look for that, still save a little bit of money over full-on brass ammunition. And then if you can find it in stock anywhere, there is also the Wolf Gold, which is brass case and boxer primes, but it's still a little cheaper than some of your other brass case offerings. All right, I think we chased that rabbit clear back to its hole and killed its whole family. Go through here. I see Warsaw has joined the chat and pinged me. Number one, welcome to the stream. And no, I agree. Steel case ammo, if it wears your barrel any faster, we are talking a couple thousand rounds. And across the life of a barrel in an AR-15, that is a drop in the bucket. I reference a lot of times Christopher Bondi of Regular Guy Training. He runs steel case, not exclusively, but he shoots a lot of it. He has several videos on it, and he replaced a video last year that had replaced a barrel last year that had finally started keyholing all the time, even firing M855, which is just a good round to use to test because 1 in 7 and 1 in 9 twists stabilize it so well. And I think he said he was at something like 15 or 17,000 rounds on that barrel. So if you do the math, if you're saving $50 to $100 per case of ammunition, and you're going to get 15 cases out of it, or out of a barrel shooting steel case, you're looking at saving $750 to $1,500. You can buy a lot of barrels and all of the tools to replace it for that. You could even buy a chrome line cold hammer forged barrel and pay a gunsmith to install it for you for that. So I've mentioned it before. There's a reason you're going to see me shoot a lot of steel case on the channel, and if you see me, this might help.
I thought it sounded like you're a little quiet.
There we go. If you see,
that's a lot quieter now.
If you see me switch to shooting primarily brass case, either the steel case is all dried up, or I've gotten an ammo sponsor. So if any of you guys have an in to get me an ammo sponsor, I'll take it. Even the Germans used it, many other nations. Sorry guys, I'm reading through Warsaw's chats here. Gun range has to replace the steel plate because it's steel plate, and then it's weak because should say Mark 18, you're mentioning vaccines contain heavy metals. That's a big part of the argument of the anti-vax crowd entirely, is that most of our medications have some trace of heavy metals. So, and until I see a full breakdown, that's all conjecture, because at this point the vaccine is conjecture in its entirety. There's also a chance that they say that they're going to be chipping people in the vaccine. So it's all, right now that's all rumor and hearsay.
My only problem with that is, why wouldn't they just do that now with flu? I mean, most people get the flu virus already.
Right. And healthcare professionals I know are figuring that probably next flu season, if everything fast tracks and gets FDA approval, that it might be a combo vaccine, flu and COVID-19. It's hard saying.
Yeah. I mean, I'm skeptical in general anyway, so.
Plates that are above paper target. Sorry, Warsaw, I'm trying to. Steel plates also, if one gets hit by a steel jacket at the gun range, it has to replace the steel plate because the steel plate is then weak. So I did some testing with my AR, engaging the steel IPSC targets on the 100-yard range with steel jacketed, or with Wolf 223 with the bimetal jacket, trying to ascertain for myself whether or not it was going to be a problem on the steel. And there are people who have actually shot armor piercing rounds at those plates, so finding a fairly virgin part of the plate was a challenge. Went down, found a fairly smooth spot. I put 3 rounds on target in that. Not only did the steel case ammunition not damage the target, it actually had a lead buildup it made the target thicker there. So I'm going to stand by my argument. Once again, the steel used is a mild steel anyway, and so it's not hardenable, and B, it's not hardened, as opposed to your M855, which actually has a hardened steel penetrator core. There's a lot of metallurgy that goes into it. If you're seeing damage from the steel target hangers being hit, I'd be very willing to bet it's just the energy. I put some of my Wolf 223 across the chrono, and even out of my 16-inch AR, I was north of 3,000 feet per second. So that's a lot of energy on target, and so there is that energy has to go somewhere, and so part of it's going to be the distance from the target. There's just a lot to it. And then going back to your comment about countries that have issued steel case ammunition, even the United States is in that list. During World War II, there were, when we had copper and brass and so on shortages, they were issuing steel cased 45 ACP for use in the 1911s. So yes, plenty of militaries have issued steel case ammunition. Everybody likes to point at that Lucky Gunner test from several years back, and all of the barrels in the rifles that were eating steel cased died in under 10,000 rounds, and the brass case was still not keyholing at the end of that test. But I'd also like to point out that those firearms went through something like 6,000 to 8,000 rounds before failure in under 4 days. So
yeah,
that's a lot of stress on the barrel. So in those conditions, if you have a fully automatic weapon and you're doing mag dump after mag dump, well, number one, if you afforded everything to that point, you're probably able to afford brass case. But in that instance, you may see higher wear from steel case. Once again, I'm not a scientist. I'm just a poor who wants to get to the range and do it as economically as possible without costing myself more money in the long run. Because sometimes you do have a case of pay me now or pay me later. I don't personally believe that steel case ammunition is that case. All right, Poor Conservative in the house. Welcome, Poor Conservative. And once again, guys, if you weren't here at the very beginning, down in the description, if you're watching on a computer to where you can open a new tab, great. Otherwise, just keep it in mind for after the stream. We do have a link to a giveaway for a brand new Cat Gen 7 tourniquet. So brand new, I don't even have it in my possession yet. I placed the order today, so we'll be doing that drawing just after the close of May. We'll be doing that on June 1st or 2nd, and I'll be reaching out to the winner and getting shipping details then. All right, let's let me finish reading. Steel plates in indoor gun ranges are designed to point bullets away from other areas. Yeah. Things are a little different on indoor ranges anyway. As a matter of fact, most indoor ranges don't allow center fire rifle in the first place because of the energy. So, and then that gets into a whole nother discussion. The more progressive of them will actually require synthetic jacketed, such as the Federal Syntec, and or frangible ammunition. Just because, for instance, a couple weeks ago I was out at the range with a couple buddies, and I was back at just in front of the pavilion on the 25-yard range. They were up at around the 10-yard line, doing some target transition work between steel silhouettes, and I was catching jacket fragments as shrapnel back at the 25. So there's good reason for them to be a little pickier about what they allow at an indoor range. So, and definitely, I can definitely see if an indoor range wanted to require all frangible ammunition for centerfire rifle. I mean, the backstops and everything in a range like that are kind of pricey, so they're protecting their investment. So, anyway, how about we start digging into some news? What do we all think about that? Sheepdog Firearms, you can't use green tip. Yeah, a lot of places, if you're not just punching holes in paper, you can't use green tip. And it's kind of a waste of green tip. So, anyway, into worldwide news. We're going to start there. And we're going to look down to our friends in New Zealand, where after the Christchurch shooting, New Zealand Prime Minister just absolutely locked down, called for a complete ban on firearms, and unsurprising to all of us, the rates of violent crime using firearms has increased, not decreased.
That's crazy talk.
Right? So, in case somehow you're watching a stream on a channel called Tactical Review and you think that gun control would work, let's break this down. So in a society like what we have here in the United States, let's focus on the Midwest, maybe in a rural area, although I'd say it's safe to say even in a lot of urban areas. A would-be criminal decides they're going to target a house and break in the middle of the night. They have to stop and think to themselves, there's a chance, maybe even a good chance, that these folks have guns.
Mm-hmm.
In an area where there has been an outright ban, a criminal, a would-be evildoer, who is already planning to break the law, so they don't care that the gun that they have isn't allowed, they think to themselves, I have a gun, and these people legally do not. I have nothing to fear. So the commission of a crime let's be honest, strategically, okay, morally those people are reprehensible and just garbage. But strategically, why would you not give yourself every advantage you could? I mean, you can't fault somebody for that. You can fault them for the rest of their thought process, but...
Right.
And so that means that crimes are being committed with a very lopsided force dynamic. People are naturally going to fight back when they're in fear for their lives, and so there is a higher instance where these weapons are used and cause violence. Are used in violence. Weapons never cause violence. They don't. It's impossible. So, anyway, so to our friends in the north, up in North Montana, Prime Minister, maybe you should take a look at what's happening in New Zealand before you fully finish trying to disarm your own citizens. Take a look at the numbers that the public doesn't typically look at, especially when statists are presenting the numbers from Australia. Australia is not the gun-free utopia that anti-gunners present it as in the rest of the world.
Right.
Now, for most of us who are present in this stream, whether it's the two of us on camera or whether it's those of you in the viewing audience, we understand this. I get that. I'm preaching to the choir, but just in case you guys weren't certain that what we all thought would happen, did happen. Yes, New Zealand is having a hard time with violent crime and with crimes using a gun.
Yep.
All right, so national news, and this is one that I meant to talk about and forgot to read. So Elias, I'm relying heavily on you as we talk about the FISA bill that just passed. It just passed the Senate with a 77-19 vote. So you want to walk us through what we're talking about here, Elias?
Yeah, let me refresh. So, FISA bill was one of those bills that pretty much allowed the government to do whatever they wanted and spied on whoever they wanted when they wanted. Let's see.
So,
this was actually good news, though.
Right. So
FISA bill allowed, right, FISA bill was the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act, which was meant to theoretically help to spy on, to get intel on terrorists and things like that, not necessarily just nation states. Except that it's been used over and over and over again for spying on Americans in country. And there is a secret court where everything is sealed. There is no due process, and pretty much the court is, it's pretty much a rubber stamp. If the government goes to and says we want a warrant, they're going to give them the warrant. They don't really care. They have been trying to make it easier. They were attempting a bill that would make it, that would, if I remember right, would make it to where they don't even need the warrant anymore. They can just get the records easily.
Wait, I thought due process was a thing.
Well, when it's a secret court and nobody knows, then it's kind of hard to take it to even take it to court, because you don't even know that you have a warrant against you.
Fair enough. That sounds like,
so might as well just get rid of that pesky warrant requirement, because I mean, in practice, nothing's going to change. They're able to do pretty much whatever they want anyway. However, the latest one, they've been having a problem with reauthorizing certain sections. Some of the sections from FISA and the Patriot Act have to be renewed every so often. And that renewal for quite a few provisions expired in March. So they've been kind of trying to get it renewed, and this last one kind of gave a little bit. This last bill that they passed, the House has gotten their side passed. It went to the Senate, and the Senate passed the 60 vote threshold that they need to actually get the amendment passed. Passed something for it where it's going to kind of actually make it harder to get those warrants, make it harder to do that spying. So now it's going back to the House. The good news is we don't really know how it's going to play out in the House, but the good news is that it's going to prolong these sections getting renewed, at least.
Right.
Which gives the ones who are actually trying to fight for the American people a little bit better chance. Because as it gets dragged out, it gives people more, as the news comes out, more people calling in and hopefully getting some things changed. The hope is that if the House passes it, Trump will sign it. Trump was going on about, in his campaign, going on about FISA. Now, whether or not he'll actually sign it or veto it, who knows, because he's switched gears several times.
Yeah, he went on and on about things like constitutional carry, too.
Yeah, exactly, and we've seen how well that's worked out. To the point that he's making fun of pro-Second Amendment in Virginia, while at the same time claiming to be on their side.
Well, once again, I can't say that we all know. Let me phrase this differently, because I'm going to have probably some people drop off the stream now, but that's okay. I've said all along, Trump is a narcissist, and he will do whatever he has to feel like he's going to make himself look good. Now, in some ways, that's been helpful, because he's done a lot of things that have strengthened the country in many ways, because that makes him look good. But if a knee-jerk bump stock ban If he feels like that's going to make himself
Yep.
look better, that's what he's going to do.
Yep.
So, but this goes back to none of the politicians are our friends.
Correct.
Unless you happen to be personal friends with one of them, obviously. But on the whole, they are them. They are the special, powerful, chosen few. You know, all the animals are equal, but some are more equal than others. So,
Yep.
Brastard, hey, welcome. Hunts for Life sounds like a criminal government. I think that with most of the news stories I read. And you're absolutely right. Criminals should fear broadheads and blades. But governments that think gun control works usually end up banning those things as well. If we had some friends from England in the chat with us, they could probably share some experiences with that. And speaking...
Yeah, okay, this is what I thought. It was meant to push back on the browsing history part of the bill, and in it authorizes and encourage and pushes judges in that secret court to seek out amicus briefs, which for those who don't know, amicus briefs are pretty much trying to get, what's the way to put it? Amicus means like friend of the court, and there are briefs that are coming from independent people who are for either side to offer more information to the court. So the court's not just looking at this going, oh, okay, well, I really don't know what any of these words mean. I'll go ahead and approve it because I don't actually know what they're doing. So it pushes judges in these secret courts to bring in experts and say why it should be allowed or should not be allowed. So,
Okay. And poor conservative, I don't necessarily disagree. 4 years ago, I was disgusted at what the ballot read. More and more, I feel like every election is like the vote or die episode of South Park. Your choices are always a douchebag or a crap sandwich. And I hate that. We shouldn't have to pick the lesser of two evils. Things broke a long time ago that we are to the point where every election, and it seems like more and more every election, I feel like I'm voting for the lesser of two evils. Or I feel like I'm not really voting for the candidate for whom I cast my vote, but I'm voting against the other candidate.
Exactly.
And I feel like something's broken in that scenario.
Yeah, fully agree. You know, and the sad part is that these are the best candidates that either party can offer. I mean, well, let me take that back. The Republicans can't do anything about it. You don't go up against somebody in your own party when he's up for re-election in the White House. But, you know, from the Democrat side, that's really the best that the DNC felt. I mean, I could think right now better candidates from the Democrat side. They definitely have better candidates that could have... that would have just been better for people in general. Even if you don't want to say that you're going to vote Democrat, it would still have been a better choice than what they put up.
Hey, Zeke, how you doing, man? I'm doing great. Everybody in the chat will have to shout out for themselves. But, and Elias, as far as that, I have a theory, actually, that I have a feeling that the vice presidential candidate that the DNC puts up is actually their presidential choice. They're hoping that Biden can get elected and then either have him resign for medical reasons or he just resign from life for medical reasons.
Are you me? I had this conversation recently, and I said, watch, if Hillary Clinton is the vice presidential selection, I know exactly what's going to happen. He's going to be Clintoned within a month or two of taking office.
If he's lucky. If he's lucky.
Yeah. Well, they have to wait. They have to wait until he's in there and everything. You got to wait until the transition is done, and then you do it. But, yeah.
So,
if she is, then don't be surprised if she's president by mid
Well,
2021.
here's the thing though.
He has to win first.
I start to say,
so.
yeah, that's the thing, is that I still don't understand how they think that he's got a snowball's chance in hell of winning. So,
don't underestimate.
well, that's true, because 4 years ago there was champagne being popped by the time everybody woke up and figured out. Of course,
Yeah.
I still feel this sounds draconian. Okay, and I realize that the First Amendment says what the First Amendment says, but I hate the fact that we get this running play-by-play as the polls close. You know, because when the polls close on the East Coast, there's still 3 hours of polling until they close on the West Coast, and I've always felt like that.
It's intentional.
Yeah, that can definitely.
It is the media's attempt to sway the vote.
Wagging the dog.
Yes, it's the media's attempt to sway the vote.
So.
And that's what they're gonna, and it's gonna push very, very hard as we get closer to November. So, don't be surprised if somehow Biden wins, and if Clinton is his running mate, then don't be surprised when he's dead a couple months later.
Oh, absolutely.
Just like Scalia, who had nothing wrong with him, ended up dying of natural causes, so will Biden.
Oh, but with the events of this year, though, Biden will die from coronavirus.
Okay, I'm sorry. It'll be COVID-19.
Right.
It'll be COVID-19, which will encourage that, we still need to go on lockdown because it killed the president.
Correct. Oh man.
For your safety, citizen, for your safety.
I just threw up my mouth because I can see that. Like I can see those headlines. Okay. On to equally unhappy news. And I'm going to be kicking you guys a couple of things here. The first one is a Firearms Policy Coalition action link on Senate Bill 3743, which would... So there's the action link, and then I will also kick you guys the body of the bill. And this one grinds my gears.
This one I'm actually worried about a little bit more.
Senate Bill 3743, introduced by Connecticut Democrat Richard Blumenthal. And Vanessa, if you're in here, get your elected officials under control. Anyway, this is wanting to regulate ghost guns. Teamed up with Everytown for Gun Safety and the Giffords and whatever. Basically, it's just another politician who misunderstands how this stuff works. Your typical violent criminal isn't looking for a weekend project. I hesitate to try to remember how long it took me to finish out a polymer-based 80% firearm, but I think it was still 45 minutes or so. And that didn't involve putting a slide together or anything. I mean...
Yeah, and here's the thing. If somebody is going to go through those lengths, this bill's not going to do anything. They're still going to do it.
They're going to need a serial...
It's kind of like how I talked to the 3D printing part of it. Fine, make it illegal. The guy is somebody's still going to do it if that's what if they have ill will.
Well, and here's the thing: just because it's illegal doesn't mean it's impossible. All right, let's take 3D printed components. Oh, it's illegal to possess the files. Well, if you transfer it via SneakerNet and you
the file's already out.
And then you die in a shootout after you've committed your crime anyway. What does it matter that the files that are on your hard drive make you extra criminal at the end of the day?
Dead.
And I actually...
Well, and that's the thing, is the people who already had the files had the files. And even if you passed it now, somebody who wanted to use those for, say, an assassination or something like that, they already have. You're not going to stop
Right.
anything
Or
at this point.
once again, I mean, just ask the MPAA. How successful have they been in shutting down Putlocker? I mean, every time it gets shut down, it gets relaunched
Right.
with another top-level domain. They're not going to take it
Correct.
down.
Correct.
And even if they're trying to trace all those files, you know, a couple of layers of abstraction and a McDonald's VPN, and somebody's downloaded the files using a live USB, and yeah, that's kind of an inside joke. That's why Elias is laughing. That's an inside joke from another community we're involved with. But the fact of the matter remains, though, you know, you use a temporary virtual environment, you download it, you know, it doesn't take a lot, and it's not that it's impossible to backtrace. It's that by the time it's backtraced, the deed has been done. And
It's already been
so,
done. Correct.
And Zeke, you actually said you said something that I edited that the form letter that was in there, and I pointed out that if this is something they think they want to do, they're going to need to basically go through every hardware store in the United States and serialize every bolt, serialize every
Don't
piece
give
of
them
pipe.
ideas.
I mean, look over in the UK. There's a fella. He actually built a pretty ergonomic looking and a fairly reliable, as my understanding, submachine gun and magazine in that highly locked down dystopian, just to show that he could. He willingly went to prison just to try to show them the folly of it. It was never used in a crime. He never intended to use it in a crime. It was kind of a thought experiment. Back in October,
Yeah.
February. Here, okay, crazy thing. I was trying to find the information on this. The mass shooter in Germany who used 3 homemade firearms and homemade ammunition because of how highly regulated everything in Germany is.
Yeah.
I think that was the October shooting. And the crazy thing is, in the last 6 months, there have been 3 active shooter events in Germany. This bastion of gun control. And the anti-gunners, every time there's an active shooter there and they're shut down, they point to how effective the gun laws were in mitigating the damage. Excuse me? The circular reasoning.
Here's the thing. Here's the thing I do worry about. This is actually one I'm worried about because it's an easy one for Republicans. Because it's an easy one for Republicans to sign off on and do really well with their Democrat constituents.
Yeah. Oh, we're
because
being
they're going to look at it
reasonable.
as saying, well, the vast majority of people don't even know what this is. And even say, yeah, the majority of people don't know what it is. And of those who do know what it is, only a minority actually ever would build one. So they can look at it going, well, it really won't affect that many people. It's going to score me some points come November.
Yeah.
And that's the thing that concerns me. And they can, use the media to say, well, just like with the whole bump stock thing of saying, see, this is really what we need to do. So this bill is actually one that worries me a little bit. I am happy to see there's no Republican as of right now co-sponsoring it, but it just got introduced a couple days ago. This is one I think we really want to keep an eye on because of all the ones that we have looked at over the past few weeks. This is the one. The other ones are too out there with banning the weapons. They know, Republicans know they can't sign off on something like that because that's gonna tank them. But this they might actually be able to get past and still do just fine.
Well, so here's what we need to do. We need to be using that action link or calling our representatives or emailing them off, without the action link or sending letters and we need to be sharing this information.
Yep.
All right, most of you guys that I'm seeing in the chat, I see you guys liking my posts on Instagram, and hey, I appreciate that. I appreciate the love, but that also tells me you have a social media presence. And I'll grant you, Instagram's not the easiest way to share something like this. Use Facebook. Send it out in an email blast. Even if you just reach out to your Pro 2A friends, if you reach 3 and each of them reaches 3, etc., etc., it becomes geometric. Because here's a thought for those of you who caught my my side folder install video. I mentioned needing those length of pole limiters, and I used a piece of wood to accomplish that, but I eventually would like something a little bit nicer, a little bit more finished. And SB Tactical, again, they have a product made specifically for what I'm doing, and it's perpetually out of stock. Perfect use for a 3D printer, and will be perfectly illegal for a length of pole limiter because I'm manufacturing a firearm component. All right, let that sink in.
Yeah.
That's how asinine this is. But for most people, it's going to be just like the bump bands. Nobody needs that.
Right, and they're going to look at it as, like I said, the Republicans will look at it as it's such a small minority that they realize they could do better. They can actually gain more from the Democrat side.
So
to them because they'll have that. Yeah. So it's a really good PR move for them, which is what concerns me.
But that said, being vocal, I was going to say a vocal minority, but the fact of the matter is when you look at NICS checks being conducted, when you look at non-scientific polls being conducted, we gun owners are not the minority, but we've allowed ourselves to become the silent majority because we're afraid of being labeled as terrorists, or we're afraid. Guys, I've got news for you. The people that are trying to push this through and chip away little by little, to those people, we are already terrorists. Because we believe in our right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. To those people who would say, nobody needs an AK-47, nobody needs an AR-15, you are already a terrorist. Or a terrorist in waiting. And hey, look at that. I'm buffering on YouTube now. Oh.
Here's a surprise. I'm sorry, government good. Government good. Thank you, YouTube. Let's see if that helps.
Oh. Well, we're coming up on 10 till the hour. Maybe I'll give them the benefit of the doubt that it's... Yeah. So, anyway. And... Brastard, you're talking about the active shooter in Germany, and you're right. He did have issues with his home manufactured guns, and that's where they're saying that their gun laws are effective because it would have been deadlier.
Yeah.
To me, though, it just shows that the evil that they're trying to contain doesn't need pre-manufactured stuff. And many times, the total death toll gets worse when, out of frustration, they forego firearms entirely. I'm not going to say anything deeper than that because it could be construed as giving somebody ideas. So, yeah, all right. That was a good one to get fired up on. Things like that are just absolute idiocy. And I don't always have the time to do so, but I'm a creator type person. The satisfaction I get when, whether it's writing a script to do something in my job more effectively, or whether it was when I was welding, that satisfaction of I made this thing. And that is central to traditional America. And so this attacks the very core of that. And so things like this really aggravate me when they want to try to attack kind of home gunsmithing.
Right.
How long is it before, even if they allow us to keep our scary assault rifles, how long is it before even popping out the takedown pins for cleaning constitutes gunsmithing at home? It's asinine. It's just asinine. Hunts for life, you're right. We are the brave. We are not descended from fearful men. That's something that I've found myself saying quite frequently over the last 7 weeks as I watch people cower in fear over this virus. So, okay. Down in New Mexico, which has been a hotbed of tyranny since the start of this, the governor did announce that effective this past Saturday on the 16th, that small retail businesses, including gun stores, can operate at 25% capacity as long as the COVID-safe practices are in place. How about I give you guys the link? So there is it looks like there was still a several week delay though on allowing gun stores or small stores. Yeah. There are lawsuits active in New Mexico over the way that was all handled. So, can anybody explain to me why it is that, or how it is that this little single cell organism can tell the difference between a Walmart or a mom and pop store? Nobody has been able to effectively explain to me how it is that we can go to Walmart and not get the virus, but if we go to a local small business, that we're suddenly at this huge risk of infection. I just, as much as I'm being facetious, I'm also being serious.
I got nothing.
If we were going to go for a capacity limit, I can kind of see that. A percentage of stated fire capacity, that makes some sort of sense. And then let the businesses decide whether or not they want to operate under those, or just, and heck, maybe even have some relief funding available for the business that says, no, the requirements for cleaning and whatnot that it requires to stay open are too onerous for a business our size. We can't afford the extra labor. So, okay, we have some relief funding available. All right. As it is, there's a lot of like restaurants around the country that, while operating at 50% capacity and doing the extra cleaning on touch surfaces that they have to do right now, because restaurants operate on such a thin margin anyway, if they reopen under those conditions, they're actually going to lose money per seat. So give the business the choice. I don't understand why it wasn't this way from the beginning, and especially when we see numbers like those coming in from South Dakota, where it really didn't end up making a difference.
Right.
I don't know. I don't understand. And Elias and I have had this conversation round and round with mutual acquaintances of ours for the last 2 weeks, and still don't understand. Oh, hey.
Yep.
Here is a link that went in national news that I missed. There is a lawsuit having been filed against the Federal Department of Justice. And, correct, Randall, whatever the box stores are having to do, the small businesses can do. And let me step back one story. You guys can go ahead and open that link and start browsing if you want. And it's the reason that I mentioned a percentage capacity limit, because the concept would have been, devil's advocate here, that people are in a more confined space in those smaller stores.
Right.
The problem is that after those first couple of weeks, and Elias and I have talked about this in streams past, we had more people trying to go to or the same amount of people, or nearly the same amount of people trying to go to fewer stores, and so we ended up more confined than what it on paper maybe should have been. So that's where it goes back to, maybe in the beginning it was understandable and it made some sort of sense, but after about 2 weeks things should have been dropped back to a different percentage. I actually had a link that I decided not to use for this that pondered the question of whether we made things worse with stay-at-home orders. It was a good read. It was on Ammo Land News from this past week, but it really wasn't necessarily pertinent as directly to the Second Amendment as I try to stay, at least tangentially. So anyway, back to this lawsuit against the Department of Justice. Was filed by, and I'm going to probably butcher this name, but it looks like Stambula Law to me. The Department of Justice has failed to turn over records in accordance to the Freedom of Information Act. And Elias, are these records specific to issues that states have seen during the epidemic, or is this even wider reaching than that?
No, I think this is wider reaching. From what I've seen is that they know that the Department of Justice has gone to bat before for First Amendment.
Right. Okay.
And that's kind of what they're saying. They're saying, "Hey, you've had statements, so we want to know all the statements that you guys have made in any lawsuit having to do with the Second Amendment." I think what they're trying to say is, have you ever actually stood up for the Second Amendment?
Right. And it's not just the First Amendment is probably one of the most frequently defended in the courts. And then we see things like illegal search and seizure, and we see some of the other Bill of Rights that get their day in court on occasion. But as much as the Second Amendment is under attack,
so that's what I got out of it, was that they want to see, has the government ever tried to defend the Second Amendment, and if so, if not, then why not? And if so, that can actually, I would imagine, I'm not a lawyer, but I would imagine that can be used in the future, precedent kind of thing.
Right.
Excuse me.
I would think so.
But I think what they're thinking is that it's going to end up being that first thing, that there is none, and if not, then why haven't? If they've cared enough to make statements about the First Amendment, why haven't they made statements defending the Second Amendment?
Right. Hey guys, we have been on the air right about an hour, and I think that I'm gonna, since these streams tend to go hour and a half, 2 hours, for Elias and I's sanity, give us a chance to regroup, and for yours. I'm going to make this break at about the 1 hour mark a weekly thing. So go ahead and refill your popcorn and your beverage, and we will be back in a few. Alright, hey everybody, we're back. Just make sure you guys all refilled your popcorn and beverage, correct? And that can be tea, water, coffee, or the adult beverage of your choice. We don't care. You're a grown-up, you do you. So, you know what, Randall? I refrained from drinking an entire pot of coffee in the first hour of the stream this week. Alright, give me a break. And
you just had a break.
Oh, true. See Ya Hunts for Life and A-Dubs. Oh, hey, A-Dubs is in the stream. I missed you, brother. Welcome. Thanks for joining again this week. And let's get back into... Let's come back here with some good news for our friends down in Louisiana.
You had some good news this week.
I did.
Might as well talk about it.
I did. Down in Louisiana, House Bill 746. Wait, did these passed out of the House no, they passed out of committee and they're headed to the floor. So you guys, if you're in Louisiana, if you have friends in Louisiana, make sure you let them know they need to reach out to their state level representatives and express support for House Bill 746, which would, and this harkens back to Katrina, allows those who lawfully possess a firearm to carry concealed for self-defense during a mandatory evacuation. That was a crap show during Katrina. That was an absolute.
Yeah, there were a lot of things that went wrong there.
House Bill 781. Again, these are Louisiana House bills. Establishes that firearms and ammunition manufacturers, distributors, wholesalers, suppliers, and retailers are essential business. And also prevents gun owners' rights from being infringed during curfews. You know, here's the thing. It's kind of like the warning labels on consumer goods. Most of the time, laws don't get introduced or bills don't get introduced without something, predicating that. Or so
Right.
I'm wondering the whole curfew thing. I wonder what led to that. Anyway, House Bill 140 is basically a preemption bill. It prevents local authorities and municipalities from imposing restrictions to prohibit the possession of a firearm. And then House Bill 334 authorizes a concealed handgun permit owner to carry concealed handgun in church, synagogue, mosque, or other place of worship. That's states that don't allow you to carry in your place of worship have always confused me a little bit.
I think that it came, well, part of it I think may have come from an old tradition, was that soldiers would not be under arms inside of places of worship. It was seen as disrespectful. But this is definitely something that needs to be left to the place of worship.
Well, and
that should be up to the church or the mosque, synagogue, whatever, to make those decisions, not the government.
And I can see where an individual would say that a place of worship is to be a place of peace and bringing weapons of war, weapons of violence, however you want to phrase that. Kind of like, it's sort of like where chopsticks come from in Eastern tradition. It's because knives are a weapon of violence and have no place at the dinner table, kind of thing. That said, laws preventing concealed carry or open carry or whatever, preventing self-defense carry at a place of worship have always struck me as short-sighted, because that's exactly the kind of place that a person who is of the mindset that wants to perpetrate violence, oftentimes they're also mad at God or who they perceive God to be.
Right. Or you have situations like, go look in the Middle East. You can find churches that have been destroyed, and we're not talking about a couple hundred years ago with the Ottomans. We're talking about in the last year, churches that have been destroyed, people killed in church services, and that kind of thing. I think it's a mixture of that, and I think it's also a thing of the government shouldn't be telling any private entity what is and is not allowed inside of their place. So, if the church wants to say no, if mosque, synagogue, whichever place of worship, they want to say no, fine. That's their call, and that's the way it should be. But it definitely shouldn't be the government. So it's kind of disappointing that those laws are even in place in the first place.
Yeah, I know when I visited Michigan here a few years ago, if I remember right, and the law may have changed, poor conservative would be much more apt to speak on this than what I am. But the way that it was worded, or the way I read it, is that it required permission from the clergy of your place of worship. And I can respect that. And
Which is fine.
respectfully, I would probably find a different place of worship if I was denied. But that's between me and God and my local church, and it's a moot point in Indiana anyway. But that was one thing when I lived in Tennessee. Tennessee had, it was actually a fairly recent update before I got my carry permit that allowed carry in place of worship. But Georgia, it was still forbidden. And it was always a great moral quandary because living in Chattanooga, it's just spitting distance across into Tennessee. And I had close friends who went to church in North Georgia. And the times that I would go and visit church, it was a big moral quandary whether or not to be morally correct or legally correct. So, and that's always a decision that every person needs to make for themselves. With the old saying, "I'd rather be tried by 12 than carried by 6." Pretty much spot on before Hitler. Yeah, we're going to talk about her in a minute. We're getting there. We're wrapping up the rest of the country. And
Michigan's a whole show on its own right now.
It's in the media. The media. Yeah. Anyhow, staying kind of out west though, or going back out west. We were in Louisiana. That's the South. Okay. Anyway, heading out west to Ventura, California. The county has caved in. They were being sued, and they have allowed firearms retailers to go ahead and open. However, I believe that the suit is staying on the books to prevent the same situation from happening again, if I've read this article correctly. Is that how you read that, Elias?
I believe so.
Because, again, and whether or not we are the dog being wagged or whatever, there's that fear that there's going to be another peak in COVID-19 cases and etc. And I believe this says that the lawyer wants to make sure that gun stores are not shut down again if another lockdown is mandated.
Right. Because at this point, the government's learned what they can get away with on one. So you can't really give them... You can't even give them an inch on it because they know that if you do, they know that they can get away with it again in a couple months. Because there is going to be another wave of this. It's not going to go away, just like flu comes back every year.
Right. Now, hopefully, there's not enough mutation, or hopefully it is eradicated near eradicated enough that this doesn't become an annual thing, because once again it was a novel virus, so fingers crossed for that. And then there's always the conspiracy theory that of course we won't have a recurrence next year because 2021 is not an election year, but that's...
We'll have a recurrent, nobody will care. That'll be the difference. Nobody will care because it's not election year.
So, now that we have chipped away at the rest of the happenings around the country, and we have talked about things that tyrannical local governments have figured out they can get away with. Now, poor conservative, we're going to talk about good old Michigan. So, we mentioned briefly last Wednesday that there was a rally going to be held outside the legislative session last Thursday. And there was a bunch of hoopla about how anybody who was brandishing a firearm would be arrested. And Yeah, so forth and so on. Well, anyway, the rally happened to a degree, but then was kind of rained out, and the legislative session was postponed. I'm not sure. I'm not sure how to take that. Is this saying that a show of force works? That a show of force doesn't work? I'm not sure.
A little bit of both. I mean, for one, from what I understand, the commission couldn't even make a decision. But two, the fact they stopped the legislative session, which shows, I don't know, I guess to me it shows a degree of the people can stop things. Which is what we should be able to do. We should be able to
absolutely.
stop things.
And again, these lawmakers are all expressing this outrage that, oh, we're afraid. Yeah. Well, when I don't do my job right, I'm afraid I'm going to lose my job too. Yep. All right. The problem is that these legislators have lost the fear of losing their job, and have now pushed and taken and chipped away at liberty so much that they have put the people in a position to show force, and now instead of being in fear of just losing their job, they feel like they need to be in fear of losing their life.
Well, here's the problem. One is that it's not supposed to be a job.
Right.
This is not supposed to be a career.
It's supposed to be public service.
Being in office was never meant to be a career. Exactly. It's meant to be in there for 1, maybe 2 terms, and that's it. And then go on with your life. Or like how Indiana and several other states do, where you go down there for about a month or 2, and then you're back doing your normal job. This is not meant to be a job. And the other thing of it is, this is the way the system was designed. We are supposed to be the ones in charge, and so if they're scared, then good. But it also tells you if you're scared, that means you're doing the wrong thing.
Or there's a...
Because if you aren't doing the wrong thing, you would not have.
By and large, there...
Now, here's my question. Are there any...
Go ahead.
I was going to ask, has anybody taken Michigan to court yet? I mean, Oregon just got slammed, just like Wisconsin did. And several other states, Kansas, are all starting to get slammed by federal judges saying, yeah, you don't have the right to do this.
I know.
So I'm kind of curious if anybody's actually taken the legal route yet.
I have read where there were like gun owner advocacy groups in Michigan working on some suits, and there were like business coalitions where like lawn care and things like that, businesses that should never have been marked as non-essential, and B, could have operated easily while following social distancing guidelines that were shut down. So I know that there have been, but I don't know if that's just going to the Michigan Supreme Court or if that's going above that.
Yeah, I mean, I think they need to, because at this point, it's the freedom to assemble. So, you know what? We've already starting to see federal judges go against the states, and I think it's time for Michigan needs to start taking the legal action also. Because so far, the federal judges have actually been doing their jobs.
So, and going back, just kind of one comment where, you know, if you're in fear as a legislator, probably means that you're doing something wrong to make that many people angry. By and large, I'd say that's true, because in a representative government, your job is to represent your constituents. Obviously, there are outliers throughout history, civil rights movements, things like that, where the majority were truly morally in the wrong. Obviously, again, though, I definitely feel like that's probably by and large outlier situations. So, but Just in case.
I think so, and I think you have to look at each situation.
Just in case, though,
you know?
we would get called out later as spreading hashtag fake news and condoning violence against people. That's
Yeah, I don't condone any violence against them, but I think the protests are
absolutely, and even an armed protest, because once again, an armed society is a polite society. A counter protester is going to be a lot less likely to go out and try to do something stupid if most of the people there are armed. But to the point of that, and this is where I was talking about how the media aggravates me so badly. I'm going to just drop you guys 3 news links about the protest, and then explain what I so worked up. And maybe it's just technicalities, but we've allowed words to become part of the normal vernacular to describe things that should not have been. Every one of those articles I just dropped multiple times either talk about the protesters being armed with assault weapons, which is not a real thing, or assault rifles. And I'm going to guess that no protester there had a pre-ban $30,000 fully automatic weapon, a select fire weapon. And that being the case, there were no assault rifles there. Or if there were assault rifles, they were in the hands of the police. So that bothers me. Maybe it's a technicality, but I work in IT, so I deal in technicalities. And poor conservative. GOP took Whitmire to court and lost. The liberal judge sided with her. Okay. And do you know if they've...
Was that state or was that federal? Because honestly, I think they need to take it to the federal courts and appeal it, because well, I'm not a big fan of this. The fact of the matter is they've applied the Bill of Rights to the states now, so because of that, the states are held. But the state court might look at it differently if they're looking at it just as from their state constitution perspective.
Right. Well, here's the other thing, is that in reading those articles, I did see that the state GOP is going to the state Supreme Court to repeal some of the powers that the governor has during a state of emergency, because Whitmire has abused them so egregiously.
I will say that I would think that if they were given to her by statute, though, that's probably going to be a tough sell.
Could well be.
Because if the legislature gave her those powers, or gave the governor those powers, I think it'd be kind of a tough sell. That's actually what happened in Oregon. Oregon got hit because, or was it Wisconsin? One or the other, I think it was Oregon, got hit because the judge said, okay, you didn't do what you're supposed to according to the state emergency powers. Yeah, you can do it, but within 28 days you have to have the state legislature approve it. And she didn't do that, or she, I don't know what the governor is there, but the governor didn't do that, and so the court said you violated the law, and immediately canceled all the emergency actions that were in place because they didn't abide by the rules.
Gotcha. I had
but that's what you get for giving an executive power or executive seat that much power.
Right. That's supposed to be checks and balances, but obviously there are times in a state of emergency where you could see how a committee would slow things down to where people would die.
Right, which is why it's not necessarily bad to have them, but you've got to, like what the Oregon has of having the legislature come back and then approve it, which is what's actually supposed to happen in war. For instance, the president's allowed to quick deploy, but he's supposed to, originally it was like within 30 days, had to get congressional approval. And well, Congress kind of blew all that away a while back.
Right.
And now they're just now realizing what they did wrong. And they can't retract it because the president vetoed it.
So, and one thing I'd like to say, and I think I've mentioned this before, nearly every time there's been some sort of protest, whether it was the last one, Sorry, nose itches. Whether it was that last one where there were armed protesters inside the legislature session, or whether it was the one where everybody stayed in their cars and followed social distancing guidelines but locked up downtown. Every time there's been a protest, Whitmire has absolutely decried it. Mostly sounds like a petulant child, honestly. But then there have been changes made. So to that end, so far, by and large, the protests are working. Maybe not as quickly as they should. Definitely haven't driven through her mind that she is not, a magistrate. She's not a queen or, I mean, not a dictator. Doesn't have absolute power. You guys are having to remind her of that. But it appears changes are made every time. I have noticed that. So, okay. Poor conservative said that there is that 28-day statute. Gotcha. All right. And, one thing that these protests in Michigan have obviously put law enforcement officers in a position to have to decide whether or not they are going to enforce unconstitutional orders, which will kind of take us back down to a story that's been quietly simmering in the background now for 2 months, and that is the death of Breonna Taylor in Louisville, Kentucky, at the hands of the Louisville Metro Police Department. Once again, that was murder and needs to be charged as such. They need to run ballistics on the slugs pulled from Miss Taylor's body, and the officers whose rifling matches those, they need to be tried for murder, and anybody who discharged their firearm in that exchange who had a badge needs to be tried for attempted murder if their bullets were not in her body. And so let me expand on that a little bit more, because in the 2 months since we last talked about it, or a month and a half since we last talked about this, there's been some more details that I have learned. Possibly they came to light much sooner than what I learned. But I did see something in the news, and I couldn't find this story, that the boyfriend, Kenneth Walker, was officially indicted, I think, within the last few days. I couldn't find the story that I was looking for. I know I just saw that on somebody's Twitter story here in the last couple of days. Unfortunately, or fortunately, so many of the individuals who I follow on Twitter are individuals who would have shared a story like that. So it makes it hard to go, oh, well, I know I would have seen that on so-and-so's channel or so-and-so's page and just have one source. But that's the kind of thing. It could have been shared by Colleen Noor, could have been shared by Men of Arms, it could have been shared by Sheepdog Response? Is that who? I don't even remember. Sheepdog something. Anyway, regardless, I could not find the actual post that I was looking for. So in digging, though, I have learned a few other items. As far as whether or not the police intended to be at Miss Taylor's apartment, that is Schrodinger's intention, from what I can tell. They both meant to be there and didn't mean to be there. Allegedly, her address actually was spelled out in the warrant because The drug search was targeted at a known drug dealer, and he had been observed collecting a package outside that was left at their apartment door. I don't know. Let me back up and just reiterate, and I know that Elias will echo this. No-knock warrants should not be in a police department's toolbox.
No.
Anyhow, so regardless whether her address was named or not, and certainly not at like midnight, because it was right around 1 a.m. that Kenneth Walker was arrested, and that was 20 minutes after his girlfriend was killed next to him, so obviously it was just after midnight that this raid was conducted. Further, none of the officers involved in the raid were wearing a body cam. So now it's all he says, she says. Something else that I learned new today, and this one just blows my mind. This was a plainclothes narcotics task force. How are you going to conduct a no-knock raid as plainclothes officers and not expect the occupants of the residence to respond as if you were regular people breaking into their house? You know, this whole time since I learned about this, I was operating under the assumption that, granted, it was midnight. Very likely they were asleep. Definitely they were in bed. And so the door explodes inward, and I'm picturing like full SWAT gear, right? Plate carriers, etc. Not that anybody couldn't get a hold of that and dress that way, but it would at least, you would see a uniform unit coming in. But plainclothes officers, I don't know.
Yeah, no, I mean, there's so many things wrong with this whole scenario, and it demonstrates so many of the wrong things that are going through our police forces now, and that the government has created. No-knock raids should not exist. I don't care what the situation is. No-knock raids shouldn't exist, much less for drugs.
Right.
But, I mean, I'm even of the mind that no-knock raids shouldn't even exist for violent crime. It's a danger both to the people inside and to the police themselves. Right. Especially if you end up going against somebody who knows what they're doing. The fact of the matter is our police are not that well trained. And I did this in the podcast. I won't reiterate it, but I did this in the podcast a couple weeks back of the fact of what all is wrong with doing no-knock raids and how it affects both police and people. But also, I mean, like you said, in plain clothes. If somebody comes in my house in the middle of the night in plain clothes, I'm supposed to know he's a cop.
Right.
All I know is right now you just woke me up in the middle of the night and you've got guns and
you came busting through, yeah, violently.
So yeah, you came busting in my house in the middle of the night with guns. I'm going to protect my family. I have no idea who you are, what you're doing here.
So, well, going back to the no body cameras, the police involved with this, in their reports, state that they did in fact identify themselves. They did in fact knock and try to gain legal access or nonviolent access to the premises. Keeping in mind that this occurred in an apartment building, The neighbors didn't hear any knocking. The neighbors did not hear the police identify themselves. So once again, this whole lack of body cameras in 2020 just really seems suspicious.
Body cameras are there to protect both the police and the people.
So, and then it continues getting better. Two of the, well, maybe it was just one, but at least one of the officers, I think it said there were two officers in this task force, are actually under federal investigation for allegedly planting drug evidence on during raids. It just keeps getting better and better, and of course I mean that in the absolute worst way. And at this point I had salient, I'm so disgusted by all of this. I had some salient points that I intended to make. So far, the city's response, unfortunately, is not to just discontinue no-knock raids entirely. They have modified them to where a no-knock warrant requires the approval of their department chief and requires that body cameras be worn. It would definitely answer some questions in this situation, though depending on how deeply corruption went within a department, SD cards can just get corrupted.
Yep.
Or, as much as I was being facetious there, SD cards can just get corrupted. It's not a matter of when are you going to eventually lose data off of an SD card. Or no, it's not a matter of if you will ever lose data off of a USB drive or an SD card. It's when.
Right.
The only way that you're not going to ever lose data off of an SD card is if you don't use them. I've personally lost several. Luckily, I had stuff backed up, and when I worked at the cell phone store, had to tell many people that sorry, all of your photos are gone forever. The SD card just died, and it just happens. So, people say PSL isn't a good home defense gun. You know, you hit somebody with 54R, they're going to stay hit, that's for sure. But Brastard, I am glad you said that, because that did remind me of the other point I wanted to make. If I remember correctly, and actually I bet you that it will say in here, I believe that Miss Taylor was hit 7 times by the police. Oh, this particular article doesn't have that number. And I believe that there were over 20 shots fired, which sadly is actually an abnormally high hit percentage in a police-involved shooting. Usually I think that it's something like 10% accuracy, or 10 to 17% accuracy in a police-involved shooting.
And that's where it goes back to that training. The training just isn't there.
Correct.
I don't really care what anybody says. The training just isn't there.
Well, and it just disgusts me, because if you or I, and that's the plural you, all of you guys watching, we could not boast that kind of accuracy as a self-defender and not anticipate being tried for murder, attempted murder, negligent discharge. You know, I hate when I have a negligent discharge. I have to wash the sheets.
But the way, this is kind of what's led to, you know, some of these, like, children have died because of the cops.
Right. Well, and
it's a panic. It's panic induced, and it's bad training and panic induced.
Well, and in this case, several of those slugs that had been fired. Obviously, again, this happened in an apartment building, which, if you're not familiar, means that the walls are basically made of paper mache.
Right. Yep.
A lot of those, the ones that weren't in the body of poor Miss Taylor, had to be collected from adjacent apartments.
Yeah.
So, I just...
There's no regard for human life in this thing. No regard for innocent people. Even if you wanted to say that she was an extremely violent criminal, and still there's no regard for everybody around her, and who else you could end up killing.
Right, and so once again, the question has to be asked: even were this, as you said, a violent criminal, how is that? How are the neighbors in more danger from living next to this person than they are from the police trying to take this person in?
Yep.
So this just goes back to probably our big topic from last week, which was Greg Anderson, Officer Greg Anderson from Seattle, being placed on administrative leave after he publicly posted a video in uniform,
right,
calling on his brothers in blue from across the country to stop and consider whether individual orders they were given were true to their oath to the Constitution. So, in the past 7 days, I have found that the GoFundMe campaign, it was the big one. It's been very successful, and it is in fact legitimate. That has been set up. The beneficiary is listed as Officer Anderson's wife. So if you're watching and you want to help support that, I don't have the link this week, but it's very easy to find. In fact, it was on Mr. Guns and Gear's Facebook page. So that has been confirmed as legitimate by Officer Anderson. And also in the last week, there have been a flurry of other cops. I have personally seen at least 3 who have posted similar videos. And I saw today that at least 1 has likewise been placed on administrative leave for making said video. And I think what frightens me about that is I get that there's that balance. But isn't there a point that you don't want automatons to be? You're even in the military, there's a point that you need your soldiers to be able to think.
You'd be surprised when you are trying to turn government versus people. Then no, you just want people who will follow
that's
orders.
Absolutely true. I guess I'm thinking of it in the role of being a peacekeeping force. You need people who...
A good government wants
Right.
that, doesn't want that. Bad government does.
Well, and unfortunately, we keep slipping more and more to the bad government. I saw a comment in the chat earlier in the stream that the socialism continues to march forward unabated. And it's one of those things, because whenever you say something decrying socialism, there's going to be those people who, point out public water programs and public schools and this and that and the other thing, these programs that are possibly more good than bad.
Right.
Questionable. And the fact of the matter is that those programs are only necessary because, once again, people aren't as altruistic as we'd all like to think that we are. As a
Right.
whole, and it's kind of like that line from Men in Black. It's speaking of the intelligence of people, but I think it holds true in the parallel is there that a person can be smart, but people are dumb, panicky animals. And
Yep.
if you haven't seen that in the last 7 weeks, I'm going to need you to go ahead and just spend the rest of the night going back and reading headlines, and go try to find me a bulk pack of toilet paper for my family of 6, please. And you're going to figure out that people are dumb, panicky animals. Regardless, a person can be altruistic, but a group of people are going to tend to be selfish. And maybe that's not entirely, because there can also be that positive peer pressure in a group to do the right thing even when you don't want to. So maybe that parallel is not as strong as I had hoped. But there it is. The only reason, I'm going to go ahead and say it, the only reason that the government ever had a necessity, and I don't think it was a necessity, but why there was a perceived necessity for them to be involved in as many social programs as they are, is because people are selfish. I mean, it's not wrong that the wealthiest 1% of the country could provide a comfortable living for the other 99% and still be wealthier than the other 99%. There's also the flip side that, they found some way, they found something that people wanted or needed and were able to capitalize on that, and I don't entirely know that they should be punished for that until, they're trying to charge $10,000 a dose for life-saving medicine. But
Well, like you said, it comes down to selfishness of people. And, yeah, I mean, you're right. You could take some of the richest people in the country, and all they would have to do is say, I'm donating $1 billion. Oh, I still have 121 billion left.
right.
But they, yeah.
Or hey, I'm going to spend $500 million on advertising to get the chance to be on the presidential ballot.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah. $500 million. That could have been a lot of money to every household in the United States.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway. Well, guys, I think that we have gotten through most of the big topics that I have seen and heard about for the last 7 days. I feel like there's an elephant in the room, something I meant to talk about and was like, that's a big deal, I'm not going to forget, and I have forgotten. Much like the thing that you always put in that safe place where you are not going to forget where it is, only to never find it again. Once again, guys, make sure you click that link for the giveaway. Get signed up for your chance to get a free Cat Gen 7 tourniquet. I've said since nearly the beginning of the channel, I carry a tourniquet in my EDC. I think it's a great idea. As a matter of fact, I've ordered extra tourniquets for myself, my first aid kits for the vehicles and whatnot, in this order. So definitely get signed up for the giveaway, and if you don't have a quality tourniquet, make sure you use the link in the description, head over to North American Rescue, and get yourself 25% off of all community preparedness items. I'm just a big fan of the CAT series of tourniquets. The Soft T Wide is also highly recommended by combat medics and paramedics. I haven't found a promo code for them. In fairness, I also didn't look, so there's that. Again, May is Stop the Bleed month, so it's probably out there. And while you're down and clicking around in the description area, go ahead and hit that thumbs up button for me. Appreciate you interacting with the channel. Make sure you're sharing the videos. We are, I think I looked right before the stream, we are only 160 subs away from the 500 subscriber giveaway. Looking forward to that. And you guys have been amazing in your support. Appreciate the video ideas. Poor Conservatives in the channel or in the chat, and he's the one who drew up the channel logo that's on the shirts. Speaking of shirts, that's definitely a thing. You can head over to the merchandise store and pick one up for yourself. You cannot, however, pick up the social distancing t-shirt. As promised, that went off sale Monday. So if you didn't get one of those, they are gone. If you're not following the channel on social media, you should definitely make sure to look for Tactical Review 2019 over on Facebook and Instagram. I don't do the TikToks because I am not a teenage girl. And Elias doesn't do Instagram because he's not a teenage girl. He is Liberty Review 1776 over on Facebook, however. And make sure to follow the Liberty Review podcast at libertyreview1776.com. Appreciate all of you guys in the chat. And Poor Conservative, thanks for the good words. And you guys all stay safe and healthy as well. Elias, do you have anything else before we wrap up this evening?
No, just stay safe and make sure you call your senators about that bill.
Oh, absolutely. Make sure that action link that I dropped about the Ghost Gun Registration Act, whatever they're actually calling it.
Especially if you have a Republican senator.
Make sure to reach out to your senator and make sure to share that information with your pro-gun friends and impress upon them the importance of it. It doesn't matter if they don't want a ghost gun. It's endemic of our liberties being chipped away, and once those liberties are gone, you're hard pressed to get them back peaceably.
Kind of like that social distancing shirt. Once it's gone,
it's gone. It's gone. So keep an eye peeled. Here in just a few weeks, Elias will be a guest on a couple of our regular through the week videos. We got a couple of fun ones coming up, and we're going to get together out at the range. So appreciate you guys, and until next week, shoot straight, stay safe.